There's a creek behind the old house I used to live at in Groveland. Very natural place, lots of green. The creek was about half a mile to 1 mile of a walk behind our house. My mom would take me every day that she could. The creek was just another feeling of home for me, until it wasn't. I was about 7, 8 years old when this happened. My older sister, who was about 13, 14 at the time, had come with me and my mom that day to the creek. We walked and arrived. The creek was basically 2 separate ones feet away from each other. The right side was calm. Standing at the edge, you can see it's deep. All the dense, tall trees running all along both sides of the creek. Groups of tadpoles in the grass growing in the corner. To your left, facing the creek. Looking back at it, it was about 40, 60 feet long. It starts wide, but it gets more narrow farther down, and there was a huge rock that sat at what we called the end of the creek. It was so narrow that on both sides of the rock, you can step off onto the ground and just walk back down to the beginning of the creek. We went swimming in the creek, and my sister was always competitive when she was younger. She wanted to race to the big rock at the end of the creek. So we did. I was a slow swimmer, so naturally my mom and sister made it there before me. They both were talking, facing away from me, looking out at the trees that are past that rock. I was about halfway there and stopped in the middle of the creek and looked around. It was pretty. I started to get a horrible feeling. It felt like I was about to die, and I knew that. So I turned back to face my mom and sister, sitting on the rock. The feeling got worse. I went to kick my feet as hard I could, to get there as fast as I could. As I went to start kicking my feet, as soon as I brought my foot up to kick it back down, someone or something grabbed my ankle. I felt it. It was a hand. Cold. Colder than the water. The hand was big. I could feel it basically consume my ankle in its grip. As soon as I felt it, I took the deepest breath I could to scream as loud as I could. When I went to let it out, it pulled me under, hard and fast. I felt the bottom of my jaw smack the water as it pulled me under. Just as fast as it pulled me under, it pushed my ankle back up so I above the water, still a hold on my ankle, and repeatedly pulled me under and pushed me back up. I felt water fill my lungs more and more each time it pulled me under. I was throwing my arms around as much as I could to make noise to get my mom's attention. It pushed me up one more time before it pulled me under for the final time. My mom never looked back, nor did my sister. I watched them both talk and laugh before it pulled me under. I don't know what happened exactly after that, but since then, shit just hasn't felt right at all. Logically speaking, I probably don't remember anything after that, just of the fact that already has traumatized, so I wouldn't doubt it if my brain just locked everything that happened after that away. I wanted to post this here because I'm hoping someone can relate to the situation. I'm not sure if it was completely real, or I was tired, loopy, or just imagining things. But I've never seen or felt anything like this. It is kind of a scary story, but oh well. So I work sometimes on holidays. The store I work at closes at 1 a.m., and we're out by 2. Everything was just fine coming home, and it was honestly relaxing. The drive was peaceful and beautiful, under the stars with all the Christmas decorations out. But I remember having this weird feeling in the back of my head, like a gut feeling that something weird is about to happen. I stayed slow and kept going home, watching my every move. I made it home safe, yet the feeling never went away. I get inside, cuddle up with the TV remote and some food because I was super hungry, and watch some movies. Normally, I'm not a super spiritual person, so this weirded me out. A lot of stuff came falling down in my pantry, seemingly out of nowhere. Like a normal person, I go check it out, in case the shelf broke or bent. I checked everywhere, and nothing was loose, bent, or even down. I just put the stuff back up, because I assumed they were too heavy for the shelf and they slipped off. I go back to watching my movies and try to forget about it, but the only thing that kept happening was me thinking about the feeling I had in the car. While I'm finishing the last movie, I hear footsteps on my porch. Mind you, I live on the second story, and there's only 2 apartments on each level, so I gave it no attention and made sure the door was locked. Simple, so I thought. Then stuff starts to move, and I'm just upset at this point because it's almost 3 a.m. When I go and check it out, there's no one in sight and nothing's been moved. And yes, I keep tabs of what's on my porch just in case someone tried to steal something. I was ready to go to bed at that point, so I turn off the TV and get ready to go to my room when I turn around and see someone go into my room. I live alone. It's not like a shadow or anything, and no one could have gotten in. I watched them for a full second walk from my bathroom to my room and go inside. My door to my bedroom opened and everything. IDK, what it was, and it freaked me out. To the point I slept at my friend's house that night. IDK. If I was paranoid and didn't realize it, but it still freaked me out. This is an entirely true story about a tunnel my friend and I found about 2 years ago. I was 16 and my friend was 17. We got the bus together to and from school, so we always talked about what we were going to do at the weekend. We did lots of different walks, finding lots of random things like a sawmill and an abandoned warehouse. On one walk, we were going to a rope swing we found the year before, but hadn't been to in at least 3 months. To our horror, not just the swing, but the whole branch had been cut down, and recently too. There was a path away from the swing that we hadn't been down before, so we decided to venture down it, talking about why someone would have cut down the swing. As we went down, we saw a rectangle made of railings on the left side of the path. We walked over it and looked inside. It was a mesh that had some broken locks and ripped chains on it. There were locks and chains all over the ground around the rectangle of railings that surrounded the mesh, and they had obviously been smashed. We climbed over the railings and looked in between the mesh. There were stairs down to a circular tunnel with large pipes leading into it on either side. The tunnel was made of concrete and was big enough for us to fully stand up in. We tried to open the mesh where the locks had been broken, and it came open surprisingly easily. We tentatively walked down the concrete steps and looked into the tunnel. We could see the light at the end of the tunnel. It went under a rarely used road, which is probably the reason it was so long. I always had a lot of survival things in my bag, like a flashlight, matches, and binoculars. I took out my flashlight and went first down the tunnel. It had been a dry few weeks, which is surprising for an English winter, so the floor wasn't flooded. As we kept walking, we kept finding odd objects along the floor, like used shotgun shells and burned candles. We thought nothing of it, and picked a few shells up as keepsakes. When we got halfway through, we kept seeing scrawling on the wall, some of which we couldn't read. The only thing we could read was the word incarnate, written dozens of times throughout the tunnel. Around the middle of the tunnel, we saw things that stopped us in our tracks. There were pitchforks, knives, spades, axes, and lots of other weapons that had been sharpened to perfection. My friend picked a knife up and inspected it. Etched into the blade was the word incarnate and was covered in a weird sticky substance. We weren't sure if it was blood or not, but my friend instantly put it down and we started to walk back. Then we heard voices from the way we had just walked. To our horror, 2 people were coming down the steps and one lit a lantern. We couldn't hear what they were saying, but they were talking quietly, but stopped when they saw the light from our flashlight. That moment of still and silence felt like it lasted an eternity. Then they started running at us. We turned and ran the opposite direction. All the while, the men behind us were screaming. As we got a quarter of the way to the other end of the tunnel, I risked a glance behind me. The men, who I then realized were wearing long dark red robes with hoods, had stopped, and I breathed a sigh of relief but kept running. It was then I realized that they had stopped and picked up some weapons. Since I wasn't looking where I was running, I didn't see we were running into the flooded bit of the tunnel. Before I realized, I was up to my knees in water. Thankfully, we were almost at the stairs to go up. We went up the stairs and pushed open the mesh. We didn't know where we were, but we just ran. Eventually, we found a route that we knew and ran back to the village we lived in. When we were almost at my friend's house, we realized how drenched we were, and given that it was winter, we were all of a sudden freezing. We never told the police, as we thought it would be our little secret and thought it was cool. We never went back to that tunnel. If there is any message of this, always make sure you have protection on you if you are exploring abandoned places. My friend and I still explore abandoned places, but make sure that we have forms of protection just in case that this happens again.